give you something to watch. Maybe you can watch it. Just give me a second. This here. And okay, let me see. Did I copy the? Yeah, here it is. I'm going to copy in the chat the link to this Instagram post. Have a watch and decide what you think about what this person is saying. Okay, we can discuss it together.
All right. Okay, ready.
Okay. Well, tell me if anything that you saw surprised you or...
Yeah, at first I thought about that maybe the choice would be different, but because of culture, not for the reason that she mentioned about like, I don't know if I'm mixing with some of the comments. I was reading to the comments that say that in the using the second language is like you are more detached to your emotions. So
from your emotions,
from your emotions. I wasn't thinking about
So is that a
that
good
at
thing or a
first.
bad thing?
I don't know. I don't feel that way, or at least it didn't happen to me like to be in that situation. I have heard of this similar I don't know, trial in Spanish that is experiment, yeah. That you, I think that it was with a train also, that you had to kill one
Okay.
or
There's two
five.
things. There's two things. that experiment is an experiment that exists to test people's moral attitude towards, other people. That's
Mm-hmm.
independent, but they used it with bilinguals to check if their reactions and their responses were different in
Mm-hmm.
connection with their emotions. If one language has a more emotional connection to the person or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was mentioning, that because uh, at first I thought the same in Spanish and in English.
Hmm.
Like
Okay.
I would make the same
The same-
choice. I don't know.
Okay. That's an interesting point from somebody who does use two languages regularly. So you basically don't agree with the conclusions of the experiment.
I don't know if I don't agree, but I think that it might be different with different people. I read some of the comments. I don't know if there's something there that maybe thinks differently. I am
So
reading.
the comments are people who have an opinion on the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's not the experiment itself. It's people who have,
Yeah.
an opinion. But
Mm-hmm.
similar to, what we are saying about ourselves, what we think, because in our practice, um, we have a certain perception of how these things work, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, this is something to take into account when we think about bilingualism and representations of bilingualism. Now let's look at this table. What does this table compare?
Language one acquisition and language two
Hmm. And
acquisition.
right. So it's the acquisition of the two languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, okay. And let's take them one by one and see what the similarities and the differences are. Um, Similarities. Both require a great deal of time. Do we agree?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, what is the difference in terms of time with first and second language acquisition? What would you say is the difference?
About time. Related
Mm,
to time. Um, I think with with the second language is like you are maybe conscious about the time that it takes you to get in
mm-hmm,
on the information about that
mm-hmm,
new language.
mm-hmm,
Meanwhile, the with the first one is like you acquire that language, but maybe you start when you are little and you don't have that consciousness in your head.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. But you also, with the first language, you don't have a lot uh, to do other than
Mm,
acquire a language. Whereas when you're learning a second language, your time is divided between that and other activities, right?
uh-huh. Yeah.
And so you don't have 100% of your time devoted to, well, maybe a baby doesn't have 100% of the time because they have to sleep and they have to learn other things, but they also, they have more time,
Yeah.
basically, right? Yeah. What about the next one? What's the next one?
Each type of acquisition includes automatic and I think this says monitored processes.
Monitored.
Lo veo
Yes,
cortado.
it's a bit cut. Monitored processes, right? So there's things that happened automatically without you realizing, and other things that you kind of control,
Yeah.
right? Okay, great. What about the next one?
Comprehension generally processes production of language forms.
So proceeds, not processes, proceeds.
Proceed.
So you understand before you can produce. This is the silent period that we talked about last time, right? And this happens both in acquisition and in first language and in second language, right? What else?
Sorry.
That's
I
okay.
am taking notes.
Yeah.
Each involves a process of figuring out language rules.
Right. What's the difference with language rules and what usually happens in second language acquisition as opposed to first language acquisition?
I think that when we learn a second language related to the rules, like we actually see the rules, right?
And they are explained to us if we learn in an instructed, learning is a good word in that case. If you learn in an instructed context, maybe the rule is explained to you before you have to use it, right? In acquisition, that doesn't happen. Right. So that's a difference. Now, sometimes people acquire a second language in the sense that they don't go to classes, they don't take instruction, right? So maybe their relation to rules is more one of figuring rules out, right? So that may be different. Okay, good.
Language is learned through observation and practice in communicative interactions.
Right. Did that always used to be the case in second language acquisition? Because we teach for communicative purposes, right? We teach using the communicative approach. But did languages always get taught like that in the past?
No.
No. The focus was not always communication.
Communicative.
Right. So the focus sometimes was learning about the language, a bit like learning Latin, right?
Yeah.
You didn't learn it to communicate with anybody. Excellent. Another one?
Some aspects of language are learned before others.
Right. Now, is that order the same in first and second language acquisition? What would you say? Because
I think in both
there is order, but is the order the same?
I don't think so.
Right. So in first language acquisition, we've got the babbling, we've got the 2-word stage, we've got telegraphic language. That doesn't happen in second language acquisition, right? And sometimes the stages or the steps in first language acquisition are more regular or similar across different people, and sometimes even different languages. Whereas second language acquisition, it has a lot more to do with the situation and the context, right? Because I don't know, if you're an immigrant in a country and you have to acquire the language, you're very likely to learn about, I don't know, shops and buying things before you learn about, I don't know, talking about your hobbies, right? So that difference depending on the context of second language acquisition. But in first language acquisition, it's much more predictable, let's say. Okay,
Right.
The last similarity.
Errors are a natural part of language acquisition.
Right.
Yes.
Again, they won't be the same kind of errors in first and second language acquisition. There will be errors, mistakes, things that, but they'll be different. Some will be similar and some will be different. There's things that, somebody acquiring a first language will never say, whereas there are things that somebody acquiring a second language is likely to say, right? Okay, let's look at the differences.
Great. Second language acquisition is built on a prior understanding of how language works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's what we talked about last class.
Mm-hmm. So
That we take.
we have the first language, and then the second language comes on top of that, right? So we already know a lot about how language works in terms of communication, in terms of even in terms of the fact that you need to pronounce certain things, that you need to emphasize certain things, regardless of whether you know the technical terms for these things, right? That doesn't matter. Good. Next one.
Right. Second language learners may learn languages for many different reasons, unlike first language learners who need to learn for survival.
Right. So if you don't communicate in your first language, there's no child that doesn't acquire a first language. It's part of survival.
Yeah.
Second language acquisition, you can live without, right? That's the way it is.
Yeah.
Right. What else?
Second language learners may start the process of language acquisition at any age.
Exactly. So first language acquisition happens at a period of time in your life when you do that. And typically we don't remember that stage of our life, right? We don't remember how we did it. We don't remember much about it. But second language acquisition can happen at any point in childhood, when you're a teenager, when you're an adult. It'll be different for those reasons, but it can happen at any point. Good.
Second language acquisition involves more conscious thought than first language acquisition.
Right.
Yeah.
So even if you're not in a school context, let's say, with second language acquisition, you go through a process of observation. You think about what you're doing much more than you did when you were acquiring your first language. Great.
Errors made by first language acquirers are generally accepted and frequently not corrected, whereas errors made by second language acquirers are often corrected.
Right. This is interesting because when it's first language acquisition, it's cute. When it's your student, it's like, why haven't you learned this? I've taught you this, right? Perhaps we shouldn't be so critical, right? But sometimes we're in a hurry. We have little time. We need to help our students, and we focus on the errors, right?
And also, I
Excellent.
think because of the context, it's like, okay, you are here to learn a new
Absolutely.
language.
And
And I
it's
think that's the
sometimes
urge.
perceived as a reflection of lack of study or lack of dedication, because there's the element, you don't study your first language, right? So the errors you may make are not, as a consequence of lack of study. But if you make mistakes in your second language, it's perceived as, lack of paying attention, or lack of studying, or lack of dedication, or whatever.
Yeah. The last one. First language acquirers are usually in a supportive and warm environment with plenty of contextual clues or
Cues,
cues,
cues, cues.
ideal for language acquisition, whereas second language acquirers may not be.
Exactly. So, when a little baby goes gaga, everybody goes, oh, sweet, gaga. And there's all this positive reinforcement, right? That doesn't happen with second language acquisition. It's always what you're missing rather than what you've achieved, right? And that can be quite discouraging, right, for
Yeah.
many.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So this is one comparison, first language acquisition and second language acquisition. This one is a different kind of chart that compares your L1 with your L2, right? It's similar, but it doesn't focus on acquisition, and it looks at the similarities in the middle, the things they have in common, and the differences, right? So, as we said, start at the basic stages of development. Yes, the depth of knowledge is beyond the level of input. So, how much you know of a language is difficult to figure out. There's an order of acquisition, like we just said. Behavioristic views of acquisition orders. Some people have these ideas that are very much concerned with behavior and reinforcement and conditioning. There's also this notion of the zone of proximal development. Have you come across that? The
Yeah, we
dots
are
here.
working, yes, with this zone now in Ashuantias.
Okay, okay. So it's what you know plus a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Teachers need to give equal attention to students learning L1 and L2. Now, there's usually an imbalance of that, and there's sometimes little connection between the L1 and the L2. This is thinking about particularly those cases where the children's language is different from the language of schooling. So when a child speaks a language at home and a different language in school, right? That's not the majority of the cases of our students, but sometimes that may be the case and we may not be aware of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So L1, students are normally fluent in their native language, yes,
Mm-hmm.
although they may have partial knowledge of their native language if it's a heritage language, for example, if the parents use it, but the children don't use it so much, so on and
Yeah.
so forth. That's where the language competence is strongest in the first language. Instruction is not always necessary. So, they may just have picked it up. Not much correction is needed, and there are social factors. For language 2, the older the person, the less likely it is that they will achieve mastery. Notice that it says likely. It doesn't say impossible. It doesn't say it's not going to happen. But there's a question of possibility and how much time people can devote to it, and a number of other factors that may influence the results, right? Variation of learning styles. This is something that may impact the development of the second language. If you're a very kinesthetic person, a person who needs moving around, and the class is basically all about sitting down and listening, you may have trouble learning. It may be difficult for you to learn. Backsliding to earlier stages of language development. So it may, in some cases, when the second language is introduced, impact what happens with the first language. Instruction is necessary and helpful in L2, yes, usually unable to form complete grammatical judgments. This has to do with deciding whether something is grammatical or not, right? The native speaker is supposed to be able to say, yes, this is correct, this is incorrect. Doesn't mean they can explain it, but they can say, this is correct, this is incorrect. The non-native speaker can't always do that, right? So that's an issue. Include pictures while instructing. This is a tip. And then social factors, of course, impact the acquisition of the L2 as well. And this is, again, according to Krashen, a contrast. We mentioned the difference between learning and acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that nowadays there's a lot of overlap. Let's think about the overlap because the comparison is quite clear. It says learning is artificial and acquisition is natural. But what did we say about, for example, learning English nowadays? Can it be in the middle somewhere, or can you think of an instance where it's in the middle somewhere between learning and acquisition?
Yes, there are a lot of people that know English because they acquire it from different contexts. We
Right.
were,
We mentioned some examples. So, for example, we talked about the case of gaming, right?
yeah,
Or listening to songs, right? For example, for pronunciation, right?
yeah,
There are some people who sing along to songs and they don't know what they're saying, but they've learned the sounds, right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's acquisition in the sense that they haven't been, sorry, that's my dog who gets excited
It's
about
okay.
people being outside. Uh, it's acquisition in the sense that nobody has taught you that. On the other hand, it's not acquisition as in first language acquisition, because you have the elements of your first
First
language to
language.
help you with that, right? And maybe, for example, you can read the lyrics even if you
Mm-hmm.
don't know the language, but if you can, because you're already literate, for example, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, learning is set to be technical and acquisition is set to be personal, in the sense that there are techniques
Yeah.
involved in learning, whereas in acquisition it's something that kind of happens to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
In learning, priority on the written language, whereas in acquisition, priority on the spoken language. Now, do you agree with that?
I don't think so. About learning could be written and spoken as well. And nowadays, I think that is more
Mm-hmm.
uh, spoken than written.
But this has a lot to do with the teaching approach,
Yeah, I was
right?
thinking
And
about the communicative
approach. Well,
approach.
the communicative approach aims for a balance of skills, right? A balance between the four skills. But what this is pointing at is that sometimes, for example, in very large classes or with, you know, students that can be quite noisy in a school, sometimes teachers go for open the book, page 20, and do exercise 5. And then that's writing, right? Um, in other contexts, we focus much more, but it's very much a matter of choice and a matter of what is prioritized by the teacher, by the institution, by the objectives, right? If you have a conversation class, for example, right, it's all about the spoken language. There's very little that is written. Particularly, there's very little that the learner writes. Maybe the teacher writes a few words on the board, but not the students, right? They certainly don't spend hours writing exercise,
Yeah.
right? Learning, there's a theory, it's theory focused, whereas acquisition is practice focused. Again, it depends on the approach, but it is not unusual for the learning situation to include things like, I don't know, this is a relative clause, this is a noun phrase, all these
Mm-hmm.
are adjectives, right? That kind of terminology appears in learning, not in acquisition. So deductive teaching, this is where the rules come in. The deductive teaching versus the inductive discovery of rules, right? So this is where they come from. Learning, there's a preset syllabus. This is true. In learning situations, you kind of know at the beginning of the year what you're supposed to learn. And at the end of the year, you can look back at the syllabus and say, okay, this was what I was supposed to learn. Did I learn it or not?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
program, which doesn't mean that you won't learn things outside of the syllabus if they come up. That's incidental teaching. Uh, that when something comes up, the teacher teaches it, we call that incidental teaching, because you're not going to say to the student, no, 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 that's not in the syllabus, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes teachers do say, oh, you'll learn that next year. I've heard teachers say that, right? Even at a very, I remember when my daughter was studying French, she was little, and they wanted to, I think it was colors. They were learning colors and they wanted to learn more colors, or they wanted to learn shapes or something. And the teacher said, oh, no, you'll learn that next year. You know, if a student wants to learn something, take advantage of that enthusiasm and teach it, is my advice,
Yeah.
right? Anyway, but in acquisition, there is no syllabus. It's whatever language is around you and
Mm-hmm.
whatever you need to do the things that you may need, right?
Yeah.
So that's it's the language, that situation that guides the selection of things that will be learned and acquired. Translation of use of L1 included in learning this may happen. It may happen. It used to happen a lot. Then there was a view where people said, no, shouldn't use translation at all. Then there was a context where people said, okay, use it when it's the best option available. And I think we're still looking for the happy medium, because sometimes it is used too much. Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
an issue, because it limits the exposure, right? And we do need exposure to the
Yeah.
language in both contexts.
Mm-hmm.
And so very little exposure is very little learning. But typically in an acquisition context, there is no translation, because there is no common L1, for example, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh, anyway, activities about the language, activities in the language. Yes, we understand this. Focus on form, focus on communication. When I don't know, if kids are gaming in English with kids from other parts of the world, nobody will stop the game and say, no, 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 you're missing the S in the third person singular, right? Nobody cares. The focus is understanding the meaning or understanding the instruction or whatever. In the language class, there is a lot more focus on the form, sometimes to the detriment of the meaning. Learning produces knowledge, acquisition produces an ability. And again, you know, we're somewhere in the middle between the two things. We don't want our students to know a lot about the language and not have the ability to use it, right? The aim should really be the ability.
Yeah.
Sometimes the knowledge is the road to the ability. Anyway, this is a breakdown of these concepts because we mentioned them, and it's important to understand how these things compare and contrast for our purposes, and how you know, we can use them to better understand what we say. This is also in relation to the subfields of linguistics. Very simply put, the idea is that the subfields of linguistics are connected, and there's different units of analysis that different subfields have. So, for example, when we talked about morphology, we said that morphology looks at morphemes are the minimal unit of analysis, and they look at how morphemes make up words. That's their maximal unit of analysis. So for morphology, the limit is the word as the big limit and the morpheme as the minimal limit. So Morphology doesn't look inside the morpheme and doesn't look beyond the word, right? Syntax looks at combining words into sentences, but doesn't look beyond sentences, right? Semantics may look beyond sentences, and discourse analysis definitely looks beyond sentences. But the idea is that each one of these subfields has maximal and minimal units of analysis. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, what's this little poem about in relation to what we just mentioned about units of analysis and
Part of a speech. I don't remember if it is. We mentioned the difference between phonetic and phonology, right?
yes, yes, but parts of speech is in which subfield of linguistics? Which, let's look back at this.
About grammar.
Right, right, right. So we can identify what part of speech or what category, grammatical category, a word belongs in by looking, by looking at its shape. So it's morphology, or by looking at its context, right? So, for example, um, this poem goes through all the different parts of speech that we have in the language, right? There's noun, in orange, noun, pronoun, adjective, verb, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. And then in blue, you have the examples of each one: field, mountain, street, town. And they have, for example, field, mountain, street, town, they are together in an enumeration, right? So I can say field, mountain, street, field and mountain, street and town, but I couldn't say field and mountain, street and red. That would be wrong, because in coordination, you have to coordinate things that are at the same level, of the same kind, right? So that's one characteristic, syntactic characteristic of words of the same category. You can only coordinate words of the same category. As he and she, again, he and she are both pronouns, right? So they're coordinated. On the other hand, we have adjectives describe a thing. So we have as magic wand or bridal ring. So they are connected to a noun. They can't appear in isolation, right? But, so I can't say as magic wand. I could say as magic wand or ring. I could omit the adjective, because an adjective is an optional element, right? Okay, so all these are syntactic characteristics that we have from different syntactic categories. Okay, let's move on. I want this to come later. Never mind, never mind, never mind. Let me change the color of this because you can't see it very well. We didn't discuss these, did we?
Yeah, actually we did.
Okay. So we had them before, we don't need them now. All right, okay. Okay, so let's look, let me remove that, and let's look at, just give me a second. I want you to look at these questions that appear here. Give me a second to make it more visible. Hopefully, no, that's not what I wanted to do. This, okay. So These are very general questions about language and language study, right? Um, okay. Take a look at the questions and see if you can, if there are any that sound familiar, any that you can answer at this point, and others that probably you don't know much about, but you will when you watch the video in question.
Okay. I think I could discuss like two or three.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
uh,
Which ones
yeah.
sound like you could say something about them?
Well, the first one, that what is language?
Okay.
I would say that it's a way or a method that human beings use to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that is, I don't know if complex in the terms of that you have a lot of things to learn about it,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but maybe simple in terms that with just a few words you can still communicate. um,
Right. Okay.
and I
This is interesting because you're connecting language to communication, which makes sense. But do we always communicate through language?
no.
No. And can we create language not for communication? This is the tricky one.
um, hmm.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Can you think of
Mm,
a sentence? Don't say it.
okay.
Okay. Is that communication?
No.
Right. So you've got language without communication,
Okay.
right? In that sense,
Yeah.
I mean, right? That
Mm-hmm.
is possible, let's say. So it is possible to have language without necessarily having communication, and vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is possible to um, communicate without language, right? So that's a good one. Okay, let's see another one that you can kind of uh, figure out, or
Yeah.
that you have
Um,
questions about, maybe.
about what is a word?
What is a word?
Um, I would say that it's like an element, could be,
Okay,
that is meaningful and that you use to form a complete sentence. I
okay,
think
okay.
I saw some of these in grammar
Hmm.
last year.
And what
What
about a
is a
word
sentence?
like
What,
can't or isn't? Is that a
yeah.
word? Are those words? What do we think?
Um,
Tricky.
yeah, I don't think if it is a word. I
Why
know
not?
that could be because of the meaning that it doesn't say
Hmm.
much. The
What
thing that we talk
about,
about, yeah.
because of the meaning? What about greenhouse? Is that a word?
Or two words put together.
Yeah, two words put together. What about um, transport? Is that one word or two words?
I think there is one, but I know that there are words that can be formed,
Hmm.
that can come from other two and create a new one.
Right, right. So that makes it a bit tricky, right?
Yeah.
To decide. So the point is, it's not that simple. I mean, we have an intuitive idea of what a word is. We have an intuition. But when you have to define it, and I didn't write transport, I meant to write transport as transport properly written. When you come to define it, it's a bit difficult, right?
Mm.
So sometimes it's a little tricky to decide on some of these. Okay, what other questions? Any other questions that you feel you have something to say about?
I was thinking about the word arbitrary.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Okay.
uh, the, how is language arbitrary?
Uh-huh.
Um, and I'm not sure about the word, but could it mean that something that is not predictable?
Well, arbitrary really refers to, when people say, okay, this is a table, right? Yes, this is a table. Why do we call a table a table? Do you know why we call a table a table?
No.
Is there a reason why we call a table a table? And in Spanish, we call it mesa.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a
Uh,
reason? Not really.
because no.
Not really. We call it table. In Spanish, we call it mesa. Is there a reason? There is a set of words that do have reasons.
Mhm.
Uh, clap, clap, slap, smash. What do we call these words? Do you know?
No.
Those are words that are called onomatopoeic words.
Mm.
It's a bit of a complicated word,
No,
but
I think that it rings a bell.
yeah,
It's
in
something
Spanish,
related
it's
to
the same
literature.
thing. In Spanish, it's the same thing, onomatopeyas.
Mm-hmm.
Onomatopoeic words are words that reflect some kind of sound,
All
right?
right.
So
Mm-hmm.
clap, slap, smash, uh, you know, there's lots. I mean,
Yeah.
we can probably Google, let's have a look. What examples? There you go. Onomatopoeic examples. Bang, thump, boom, oink, thud, clatter, roar. Okay. In fact, English has quite a few more than Spanish of these. And they can also, in that way that English has, be nouns and verbs, which in Spanish, you don't. In Spanish, there's fewer of these, right? But let's have a look. The sheep went baa, the dogs that bark. There's quite a lot of,
Uh-huh.
and they can conjugate them, right? Crinkled, croaked, fizzed, flapped, gargled. Okay, so they can be nouns, they can be verbs, they can be adjectives as well.
Mm-hmm.
But even so, it's a small selection of words in the universe of words, right? Most words are called something but it's an arbitrary connection between the name and the thing. There's no reason why we call a bag, a pen, a pen. That's why in different languages we call them different things, right? So in that sense, it is that language is arbitrary, right? There's no reason why these things are the way they are, okay? Excuse me, I've got a cough too. Anyway, so that's a good thing to remember about language, because there's no real point in looking for a reason, okay? There's no real point in trying to figure it out. Anyway, what else? Any other questions?
Well, there are some that I think that are related to things that
You don't know.
no, and they are going to be mentioned in the video, I think.
Exactly. So, for example, which one?
About the big red balloon example, or
The
plateau.
question there is why is it the big? It says reed balloon. It should say red balloon. So it's a typo.
It's okay.
Big red balloon. There you go. Big red balloon. The question there is why is it big red balloon and not big red big balloon? Right? Why is it? Do you know?
I know there is an order
Okay.
when it comes to describe an object. So it should be the color because of before, sorry, the size.
Exactly. Now, do you think that you probably learned this, right? When you learned adjectives and order of adjectives and so on. Do you think that when people acquire English, they learn that, or what happens?
I don't know. I don't think that they learn. I think that when I was learning English, it was more confusing to think about, okay, what should come first, and just say it, and I would do it right. It's like
Right.
I don't know even now the steps. It's like I just
The rule.
do
You
it.
don't know the rule, you just do it. Exactly. Exactly. That's the point that we were talking about. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. As you can see, there are lots of things in the video that you will learn, you will figure out when you watch this. And the idea here is that, let me just show you. When you watch the video, you use the questions to guide your watching of the video. So that's why the questions are there. And also, when you go into classroom, here's the video, and there's a document with a table where you can write down the answers. Let me just check that it's been published correctly. You should have editing access to this document. So you can just make notes so that we can, yes, you're editors, so that's fine. You can make notes and then we can talk about your answers and what you understood from the video. Okay, that's good. Okay, then there's another video that I've posted in the classroom. We're going to watch a little bit of this one. This is a video about experiments. Remember, we talked about experiments and how experiments are conducted and how we learn about how kids figure out things about the language. Let me just, it's again published in Classroom. And when you go here, and there's a quiz there, but it's, wait a minute. Okay. Let me just play it so that you can watch it, I hope. Potato crow. Okay, let me see, because, okay, I'm going to center it like this. All right. I know what the problem is. I'm in another. Okay. Okay. Because I'm using several different profiles and it's a bit of a mess. Wait. Okay. Okay. Let me just show you this when I get to it.
Born to talk.
Okay. So, you ready? Let's listen to the beginning of it and let's see what you make out about how experiments are conducted and how they go about this. Okay.
Of all the creatures in the animal kingdom, only one has the capacity to communicate through the spoken word. The baby human, born to talk. The first 2 years are a journey filled with exploration and joy. But even before the baby human can utter a word, they are busy with experiments in communication. Cooing, babbling, gesturing, listening, and imitating, until they finally master the ability to produce complete words. This, then, is that journey for the baby human.
But I don't like Jonathan.
But soon you're gonna give birth and we haven't found the name.
The process of learning language begins long before the baby human comes into the world.
What about the one?
The fetus experiences all kinds of sensations in the mother's womb. An environment especially rich for the sense of hearing. By 24 weeks, the fetus's inner ear has developed, and it can already hear sounds. The sound of the mother's heartbeat, and even more than that, the sounds of the outside world. Loudest of all, even louder than the background noise of the uterus, is mother's voice.
So she will have her baby and I will have mine and she can copy. She's never gonna leave the poor baby alone.
Over the next few months of gestation, the fetus becomes familiar with the voices of both parents.
You surprised me with that. Yeah, they can.
Well, they can make mistakes.
And research has shown that the melody and rhythms of their speech make its heart beat faster.
For sure.
This is the beginning of an ongoing communication between the baby human and the outside world. The baby human comes into the world ready to communicate. And in the beginning, the best way is crying. It elicits an immediate response. Crying is an involuntary signal of distress. The baby human can't really make any other sounds yet because they have small mouths, large tongues, and at this age, their larynx is high in the throat to prevent choking. But even though Heather's cries are involuntary, her mother responds.
Yay! Oh, my poor baby. Oh.
It's Heather's first way of knowing that the sounds she is making are a way of communicating.
Yes, much better, eh?
And that when she does, there is someone listening. When Heather hears her mother's voice, it immediately soothes her. Research shows that from the first days of life, babies prefer the human voice over every other sound. But what is surprising is just how attuned to language they are.
How strong you are, right? How beautiful you are. Yes, good girl.
Janet Worker lays 12-hour-old Marissa into a bassinet. She places a pacifier into the newborn's mouth. The pacifier is hooked up to a computer, which records the frequency and intensity of the infant's sucking. Dr. Worker and her colleague, Tracy Burns, wanted to know whether only hours after birth, the baby human would prefer her parents' native language to a foreign language she had never heard before. Marissa was born to parents who speak only English. It was the language she heard in the womb. Marissa listens to a tape with 2 languages, English and Tagalog, a Philippine language. The actual words are filtered out, and the languages can only be distinguished by their cadence. Tagalog is played first. When she hears this language she's never heard before, she gives a very weak response. But when she hears English, her parents' language, she reacts completely differently. The intensity and frequency of her sucking shoots up, and then when the tape switches back to Tagalog, her sucking diminishes. This reveals 2 amazing facts: that baby humans begin to learn the properties of language in the womb, and at birth, they prefer the rhythms of their native language to those of an unfamiliar one.
Okay, so this is the experiment that we had talked about, right? Now you can see how it works. Is it how you imagined it?
No, it was very interesting.
Why? What did you imagine? How did you think it was?
No, I don't know, because I thought about like she reaction in like the same, maybe like just to the sound, no, the with the different languages.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, but it's interesting, right? Anything
Yeah, it
else from what you heard that surprised you or that confirmed things that you already knew?
Well, we talked about that. They can assimilate the sounds inside the womb. So I already knew that. Yeah. And now the first thing that came to my mind was, okay, so if I want, it's just, I don't know, I thought maybe my children to be like exposed to both languages. I should speak in both languages as well when
Well, it's kind of
I got
inevitable.
pregnant.
It's
Yeah.
because that's a very interesting question. What happens with the children of bilingual or multilingual mothers? Because they are exposed to 2 or more languages. And then the question is, in what proportion? You know, is it 10% and 90%? Is it 50-50? Is it right? But at least, you know, you imagine that they will have, you know, exposure to both. Now, interestingly, the next question that comes up has to do with what happens afterwards. Take a look at this.
Doctor said I wasn't going to make it to my due date, so of course you get all excited and you're anticipating it. And
Oh, is it today?
6-week-old Rebecca turns her head toward the sound of her mother's voice. At this age, Rebecca's time is spent listening and absorbing. She has to make sense of all the sounds she hears. She learns that the clinking of a spoon is different from a cough. And a cough is different from the sound of a bird. In this chaotic world full of noise, from the moment the baby human is born, they have the remarkable ability to distinguish the sounds of speech, this unique vehicle for communication which separates the human species from all other animals. In fact, from the moment the baby human comes into the world, they are equipped with this exceptional capacity. But new research shows that they know something even more extraordinary. Nelson is less than 24 hours old. During his 9 months in the womb, he heard his parents communicating in English. As in the previous experiment, the pacifier is hooked up to a computer that registers the frequency and intensity of his response. Dr. Rushen Shi's experiment is designed to see if at this early age, the baby human can distinguish between different parts of speech. Nelson listens to a tape which contains 2 lists of words. The first is a list of prepositions and articles, words that have no meaning on their own, like to, in, or it. As Nelson listens, the computer registers his level of response. The second is a list of content words, like nouns and verbs.
Toys. Find
Parts of speech that convey meaning.
toys. Chair. Find shoe. Chew.
When Nelson hears the content words, his level of reaction increases dramatically.
Find
This study has been repeated with babies in many different languages with the same remarkable results.
chew.
That even at birth,
Find
the baby human is able to distinguish the words that convey meaning over all other words.
toys. Chew. Find chair.
So, again, a lot of knowledge beyond just the sound of the language, right? Now, the question is, do we stop having this ability at some point, right? Do we lose? Do you remember when we talked about the critical period hypothesis? Yeah, and the fact that we are supposed to acquire during a certain period, but then if we don't, what happens? And it's the experiment we can't do, and we've got children like Jeannie to look into, and then what happens with that? And for that, I suggest you should look at the video that let me see, where is it now? I've lost give me a second. Where did I have the slides? Here. Okay. In the the slides, window, this one. Okay. What you have is a link to a TED Talk. All those experiments you saw are conducted as in what are known as labs with people like Patricia Cull, who is a linguist who did this TED Talk that you can watch to learn about the genius, linguistic genius of babies. Okay, so this is an interesting talk that tells us about those limits that are. This is an ad that we don't want to be watching, but it's what comes before the TED Talk. So this is not the actual TED Talk. Ignore it. And there is the TED Talk, The Linguistic Genius of Babies. That's Patricia Cull, and that she runs one of the labs where these experiments are conducted. So to kind of wrap up, you've got... There's a little bit of reading to do here from chapter 3 in the linguistics library in connection to different units of analysis, etc. Then there's this video, which is the Human Language Series 1, which deals with all these general questions about language and the associated form to fill in. And this will appear, I'm not sure if it appears in the Human Language Series 1 or 2, but it's again an important experiment that has been done with children. Then you've got modern experiments from this video and this talk, and the use of how, yeah, I'm going to remove these because you haven't read this yet. Just there, just that. Okay, and then there's one more video which brings in a social dimension to the discussion, right? And it's a BBC video called Talking Proper, and it's linked to this handout that you will see here. And let's just have a quick look at the handout. The handout first has a discussion on globalization, English as an international language, some of the things that Crystal said in his podcast, with quotes from other studies, and social class distinctions in Britain, right? And then there's the video itself that mentions these words that we have in this table. Now, let's just, to round off, look at those words and tell me if you know all those words, and if you don't, what you which ones you don't know, and what you think they are, etc., etc.
Well, I know that Cockney English and Queen's English is like an accent or our accents of different kinds of types of.
We refer to them as varieties, right?
Variety. Yeah, you're right.
The accent is a part of it, right? The accent is the way the sounds are produced, the intonation, etc., etc. But the variety is everything. It's the lexical choice, it's the grammatical rules. And what do you associate Cockney with? You associated with anything in particular?
I think that with Adele, I think she's the one that speaks Cockney English.
Okay. Well, she would probably say she speaks working class English. And notice that there's a reference to class. She speaks in a certain way and she sings in a very different way, right? Talking about singers, what's the singer of give me a sec. Lily Allen. Do you know Lily Allen, the singer?
It rings a bell, but I don't think I have heard.
You have
Her music.
You have. Just let me play a little bit of her music, and I'll show you that you have. Just give me a second. Okay. Yeah. Listen to this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's Lily Allen. However,
look inside your tiny mind and look a bit harder, 'cause we're so.
Now, Lily Allen is said to use what is known as Mockney. Oh, yeah, Mockney. No, I didn't write it properly. I can't write and speak at the same time. I've got a problem. Look at Mockney and the definition of Mockney in Wikipedia. Let's look at Wikipedia. What does it say about Mockney?
Affected accent.
Aha. It says it's a portmanteau, which is a combination of two words. It's like brunch. It's not a compound. A compound is like greenhouse, where you have two distinct words. But a portmanteau is where the two words are blended. And so you've got mock and cockney, right? Now, what does it mean to say it's an affected accent? It's not real. It's pretend. Okay. Accent and form of speech in imitation of Cockney or working class London speech, because Cockney is supposed to be East End. Okay, the East End of London. I don't know if you know much about the geography of London, but the West End is where the theatres are. And the East End is supposed to be where working class people lived. In fact, there's a famous soap opera that has been running for decades, which is called EastEnders, right? Let's see how long it's been running. Number of episodes, 6,784. Okay. And created that. It started in 1985. So it's older than you. And it's a soap opera. Okay. And it's set in the East End of London. Okay. But the East End is where Cockney is supposed to come from. And it's where working class people live. But what Lily Allen uses is not real Cockney, it's Mockney, okay? And it's people who are posh, okay, who pretend not to be, okay?
Okay.
So it's different from Adele. Adele does change the way she speaks when she sings, right? The variety of English she uses is different, but it's not Cockney. It's Southern United States, right? We can probably, if we Google it, Adele's accent. We can probably find she grew up in Tottenham, northern London. So besides having a British accent, peculiarly she has a Cockney accent. Again, accent is a subgroup of British accents, yes, but North Londoner. How's Adele's accent? Tutorial test. Adele's share hilarious way her well-spoken son corrects her. Cockney accent plus RP with Adele. Da da da. Yeah, but Adele sang when singing songs. Okay, what does it say? Okay, why does Adele sing with an American accent? Okay, there you've got a discussion on Quora, which is a forum about why she sings the way she sings. The Beatles didn't sing the way they spoke. Okay, Beatles were from Liverpool. Okay, and they didn't sound the way when they spoke, the way they sang. Okay, so anyway, back to our document, the one we were looking at. You had Cockney, you had what else did you mention? The Queen's English, maybe?
The Queen English.
The Queen's English, okay. Any other words that ring a bell or that are problematic?
Yeah, well, some of them. I don't know about estuary
English. Estuary is the estuary of the River Thames. Yeah. And if we were to Google estuary English, look what it says. A type of accent identified as spreading outwards from London and containing features of both received pronunciation and London speech. I know you're not seeing it, sorry. Give me a minute. Okay, here you go. Okay, estuary English. There you go. Area along the River Thames, it's estuary, including London, da 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 da. But it gives me, okay. Wait a minute, because it takes me to a different slide from where I want the different. There. Okay, that's what I was reading to you. Okay, that's from the dictionary. Okay. So it's a kind of updated version of English, contemporary English, in the London area. Okay, in the London area. Any others that are peculiar or odd, or that you don't recognize?
I just put it jargon and Ulster
Ulster. What do you?
and
What?
cows.
Jargon. Do you know what it means?
No.
Okay. Jargon refers to the specific language of a particular occupation. So, for example, if you take your car to the mechanics, they usually use a lot of jargon, which is specific to cars that you probably don't understand. You can talk about legal jargon, you know, and sometimes people use it on purpose so that the rest of us don't understand.
Like what?
Right? But it's also the type of language that you have to use when you, or that you have to focus on when you teach ESP courses, English for Special Purposes. Yeah, because you need to explore the jargon. Ulster is in Northern Ireland. It's Northern Ireland, but it has to do with the way people speak there. Okay. What about and this I promise will be the last thing. Look at the sentences in number 2. What do you think they refer to? If I talked like that, I'd kill myself. You're looking at money. They were brought up to speak like that. If a commentator had spoken with an accent like mine, I wouldn't have been able to take it seriously.
I think it's related to culture, and I don't have the word to say it. Even in prejuicios.
Prejudice.
Yeah.
Okay, and prejudice of who towards who? Who's prejudiced? Who do you think has prejudice?
Yeah, I think that we have been talking about this standard British English thing. And well, I am thinking about the poem of this black lady talking about being articulate. And yeah, really culture and discrimination, prejudice.
Okay, great. Well, you may, and in the case of Jamila Liskett, she said that, you know, there was prejudice against her way of speaking. So maybe from the educated people had prejudices about the uneducated people, right? Do you think that can work the other way around?
That not educated people judging the educated ones?
Exactly.
In a way, yes. I think that both have prejudice for one another.
Against
one another. Okay.
Yeah. Well, when you watch the video, pay attention to who says this about what. Because you'll notice some things that maybe strike you as unusual. Again, the handout is a guide to watching the video. So if you read the questions, you will be able to follow the different sections in the video, and it will help you to pay attention to different things that are important about the video. And hopefully, you know, it will help you clarify some of these terms so that, you know what they mean, and we can discuss them next time anyway. Okay. Okay. Let me just check, double check, because next week we have an asynchronous session, right? So all this material that I've listed is for you to look at next time, and so we can discuss them the following class, right?
Great.
Neely mentioned which chapter she had chosen in the chat, right?
Yeah.
Have you decided or not yet?
Yes, I would like to do the one about age. I think is chapter number 2.
Okay, can you type it into the message so that we...
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Okay, well, lots of viewing for you to do. Enjoy the long weekend. Have a rest.
Wait, Chris, I have a question. So this chapter for the presentation, are you going to tell us the date?
I thought I had. Let me see. I didn't tell you. Good question. Because my idea was to publish. Let me see. I didn't publish the sign-up sheet. That's why. Okay, that was the problem. See, I needed to publish this, and I needed to publish this. Both things. That's why I thought it was strange, but I don't have the sign-up sheet. Okay, I'm going to publish the sample material because there's examples of past presentations so that you can see what other people have done in the past. They're not necessarily about these chapters. Yeah, some are about these chapters. And there's also examples of quizzes here that you can look at, edit and post. So it could be, if you could make it for the 26th, that would be a good idea. If you can't make it, or if one of you can make it for the 26th and the other one can make it for the 2nd, that's also possible. But you decide. There's only 2 of you, so you decide and you let me know. I mean, if there were 20 people, it would be different. But since there's only 2 of you, we've got some flexibility. All right?
Okay, so whether the 26th or the 2nd. So I talked to Millie.
Right. Exactly. You decide on the basis of other. You decide on the basis of the other things you have to do. I don't mind. Okay.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
great.
Fabulous. I'll post this as soon as it's processed, and you'll be, well, Millie will be able to see it. You were here, so you don't need to see it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. See you later. Bye-bye.
See